What do you think you need to know when it comes to elder law and someone who concentrates in elder law? Let's talk about that. Do you know the difference between a power of attorney and a guardian? Well, we're going to talk about that, so thank you.
Thank you,
I have Heather here. Heather Warren is here with Delaney and Warren, and Heather is our resident expert when it comes to elder law, as we know that her group does actually concentrate on elder law. So let's talk about the difference between a guardian and a power of attorney.
I get that question a lot, and there seems to be a lot of confusion out there on the subject, so I'm happy to talk about it.
Super.
Guardianship is really considered a court of last resort. It's when somebody is disabled, whether mentally or physically, and not able to handle their personal and or financial affairs. Then you have to go through court to get someone appointed to have legal authority to act on that disabled person's behalf. So in that case, the person appointed is a guardian. In Illinois, we have two types of guardians: the guardian of the estate, who handles the financial matters, and the guardian of the person, who handles healthcare decisions. So that's kind of the summation of a guardianship.
Okay.
Now, I said it was a court of last resort because generally most people want to plan ahead and pick who they would want to make their medical and financial decisions for them. And that's when we're talking about powers of attorney. Powers of attorney are estate planning documents that the individual themselves appoints somebody to as their agent to make their medical and or financial decisions. And then you, the individual creating that document, has the control to say who you want, what you want them to do, what you don't want them to do.
Okay.
And you have much more control over the situation. When you're in court, you don't necessarily have that control, and at that point you are disabled or you're suffering from some sort of condition that impairs your ability to make those decisions. So it's better to use your authority beforehand while you're competent and able to, and to set up who you want to be in charge.
Exactly. Well, and I think the word that you just said, while you're competent and able. So someone has been recently diagnosed with a dementia diagnosis. Is that the time they can either initiate a POA or change something?
That's a great question, Terry. Just having a diagnosis of dementia doesn't necessarily mean you can't do any estate planning. There are varying degrees of dementia or cognitive impairment. However, you definitely want to get ahead of that, and you want to establish things before you would get to that level in general, because it might be too late.
Yeah, and usually that's a doctor who would decide whether or not the capacity is there.
Correct,
Okay,
correct.
Great.
And I mean, with the guardianship court, it's similar to probate, but it's when you're alive, and it's very public and costly, and so that's another factor to consider. If you don't want that for you, then you really want to do some estate planning and powers of attorney.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Heather. And again, so important that this estate planning gets done, and we meet with elder law attorneys to help us walk through that process. So, Heather, what is a great way for folks to get a hold of you?
So we have a website that's very informative. Also give our contact information. It's www.ddvelderlaw.com. You can also reach our office at 708-675-7144.
Great. Thanks so much, Heather.
Thank you.
That is so informative. So again, I cannot say enough, especially in my role as a geriatric care manager, partnering many times with elder law attorneys, because either folks have not had all their paperwork put in place, or it's been old and it needs to be reviewed. So Heather, just one last question. How often should those documents be looked at?
That's also a great question and comes up regularly in my practice. I say every couple of years, or if there's a change, a death, a disability, a divorce, something like that in the family, you kind of want to either be looking at it every couple years or when there's a significant change in the family dynamics.
Super. That is great advice. So, well, thank you again, Heather, for just being a part of this informational. And of course, Heather gave information about how to reach out to them. And I highly do suggest that this arena of law is so, so important. So thank you again for joining us. Terry Maxiner with Providence Solutions can be reached at 708-342-8090.